Welcome back, my friends, to the D-Rate the Hate podcast. I am your host, Wilk of WilksWorld.com, and I am so incredibly grateful that you are taking the time to join me for another powerful DTH episode. Friends, at the D-Rate the Hate podcast, it's all about bettering the world one attitude at a time. See, we did not create the hate, but with your help, we can derate the hate. That all starts with gratitude and personal accountability. We cannot control everything that happens to us in life, but we can control how we react to it. How we act, how we react, no matter what happens to us, how we react to it makes the difference. Friends, there is only one good thing about a bad attitude, and that is that we have the ability as individuals to change it. Here on the DTH podcast, we strive to bring you great guests and provide tools to do just that. Please be sure to share it with your friends. Subscribe if you haven't done so. Ratings and feedback are always greatly appreciated. And with that, let's get to this week's episode. Friends, one of the primary objectives to this podcast is finding new and intriguing ways to better our lives and just do better things out in the world today, right? Because like I say all the time, bettering the world starts with each of us as an individual. How do we do things to better our lives today that will in turn make the world a better place? This world is a stressful place. There are all kinds of things that we have no control over that each day we have to figure out, how do we get through this situation? What can I do to make the situation better? Sometimes it just takes a little humor. It takes a little bit of humor, a little bit of improv, and it makes the whole situation better. It may be an interaction you have at work. It may be an interaction that you have in a relationship that you're in. But sometimes humor is the best way to decrease that stress, to bridge that divide. What do we got to do to really connect with that person that we are speaking with? Humor. My guest this week, Izzy Gesell, does just that. He's an organizational alchemist who uses humor to bring people together. Izzy has made a career out of helping individuals and organizations transform their thinking from commonplace to extraordinary. Through his keynotes, trainings, coaching, and facilitated session, Izzy offers imaginative, intuitive, and immediately useful insights and programs. He is skilled at delivering meaningful material in a way that makes participants enjoy their time with him. I know I enjoyed my time with him, so please stay tuned for another incredible conversation on the DTH podcast with my new friend, Izzy Gesell. You're not going to want to miss it. Here we go. Izzy Gesell, welcome to the D-Rate the Hate podcast, man. I appreciate your time today. I'm looking forward to this. I've been going over the stuff that you've got out there, and you know, anybody who knows how to use humor and improv to make the world better for other people is somebody that I want to talk to, and I know that's what you specialize in, Izzy. So today, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to join me on the D-Rate the Hate podcast.
Oh, you're welcome, Wilk. It's really a topic that I stumbled into as a way of trying to figure out my own life, and it's really something I love talking about and writing about and connecting with other people. I think the world we live in now needs more humor, not because of jokes, but really because of the many ways that humor helps deal with stress and frustration. And so I really appreciate the opportunity of being here.
No doubt, man. So the last couple of years, Izzy, obviously with the global pandemic being what it was, and then in my opinion, the way that especially the United States government, but the government's reaction to the pandemic and all the stress that brought on to so many people, and how the world just really changed so much over the past, say, 3 years, and how people, I think a lot of people lost sight, Izzy, in how they can use humor in situations that they have no control over. You know,
Yeah.
people just, you know, all of a sudden you had to be so serious. You couldn't make a joke about anything. And with, you know, you're worried about offending people, and now you're offending people that are already just scared because of this pandemic. And so that whole dynamic just got so ugly. And I know one of the things that you've talked about is how to use that humor and how to use that improv as a stress manager. So that's really where I want to start, Izzy,
Sure.
is how can people use humor as a stress manager when so much of what we encounter today is so stressful?
Yeah, I think that's one of the most interesting things about humor and improv or play, that they have these really deep and important functions that we all participate in without even realizing what we're doing. So I think all of us as kids, we know that if we can make fun of something, we feel better. Sometimes it's because that person feels worse, but that's not our problem when we're kids or even as adults. So if you think about the function of humor, one of the functions of humor is that it releases tension in the body. Laughter and tension cannot exist at the same time. Think of two people moving a heavy piece of furniture. They're very tight. They're very tense. You got to really hold on. And if one person starts to laugh or starts to giggle, you have to put it down. You cannot maintain that tension,
Right.
and laugh at the same time. Your body just can't hold those two things together. So there is this idea of nervous laughter, which is not laughter about being funny, but laughter because your body is tense and needs a release.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the main functions of humor as a stress manager is to release the physical tension in the body, which then allows us to be more objective into, okay, what's my stress and what can I do about it? It's really about a way of preparing for action.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the stress of this, the tension is caused by this perception we have that things are stressful.
Right.
Right. You get tense. You're nervous about going into a coach public speaking. You're nervous about going into a speech. You're nervous about calling somebody for a date. You're nervous about having to own up to something. You made a mistake and your boss is, you're going to call you in and you're really nervous. So you're really tight. One way to release tension is to breathe. So what laughter does is it releases tension, but it also helps you see a different point of view. If you think about what jokes are or funny stories, they start out from one perspective, and then the punchline is unexpected as an element of surprise. But that element of surprise is because you now realize you see something that you didn't realize that you could see. And the example that I give is about the way children say funny things to adults, right?
Yeah.
Well, kids say funny things. And that's because kids have one point of view, an adult has another point of view. They're looking at the same thing. So the story I tell is of a friend of mine many years ago. She has this 7-year-old daughter, and the girl gets really upset one night. The dad comes home from work. This is what the mom had told me. And the little girl's really upset. She goes, "Mommy, Daddy just came in and he went to his office. He promised to play with me when he came home from work, and he didn't." And the mom says what most of us would say: "Well, honey, he didn't have time to finish his work during the day, so he has to do it now." So the little girl, 7-year-old, thinks for a minute and goes, "Why don't they just put him into a slower group?"
Yeah.
Because in school, if you don't finish your work, you put into a slow group. Right?
Yep. And that
So
way
she's thinking, hey, work, that would work. So that's an example of being able to see different points of view about the same situation. A child's point of view, the beginner's mind, the 6-year-old problem-solving kid. We're taught as adults to take points of view like that. So,
yep. No, I've got a 3-year-old daughter, Izzy. And one of the things that I love, absolutely love about coming home every day is she makes me laugh every day. I mean, obviously there's ups and downs, there's goods and bads and those things, but the one thing that I just look forward to with her every day is the fact that her perception of things, the way that she looks at things, her critical thinking, or the way that her critical thinking abilities work, is something so foreign to me as, as an adult. And then when she gets to thinking and her little wheels begin to turn, and then she comes up with a solution to what she perceives the problem to be, whatever that problem is, it makes me laugh. And you're right, that tension just starts to go away. Things start to become better, even though she didn't produce a realistic solution to whatever the problem at hand may be.
Mm-hmm.
Just the fact that she has brought to the table some type of, it ends up being humor, because in their mind they don't plan anything that they're going to say. It's all improvisation.
It's all truth. It's all
truth.
observable
It's all
truth
improvisation.
Yep.
And so often, as long as you look at it the right way, you can find that humor in there, and that humor just becomes to me, it's one of the things that I look forward to most in all my situations, in every single day that I get to get to interact with my daughter. It's incredible.
You just put your finger right on it, that your ability to see her point of view and knowing that your point of view as an adult is different. There's a gap between the two, and that's where humor lives, in this incongruity. And think about stress management itself in general. We're stressed about something that we're either in the past or in the future. We're worried about what we did, or we're worried about what's going to happen. The humor brings us right into the moment. So for that moment, that's where that tension goes away. You're right here in the moment. You can't. Your body is actually rippling, through its mass there, and you have to stop and settle down and be in the moment. And what you were describing with your daughter, first of all, notice how you said that you are looking forward to that, because we know that our kids bring us unbridled joy, because that's what their life is right now. They may be crying, but then when they stop crying, they start giggling right away.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then we as adults, when we're playing with little kids, we are down to their level.
Yep.
We're going goo. We're making silly sounds. We're going goo 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 goo.
Right. Yep. All the goofy stuff that comes along with the joys of little children. And yeah, like I said, that's another thing, Izzy, and you brought up a good point there. Is they go from laughing to crying and back to laughing. I mean, just so quickly. Unlike adults that will hang on to things and let things eat them up. And then, I talk a lot on the Derate the Hate podcast about people and people's personal accountability and responsibility to try and stay in a good mood just for the people that are around them and things like that. And then I talk also a lot about, the fact that we there's so much around us that we cannot control, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, the pandemic. But we have to, as individuals, control how we're going to react to it, right? And reacting to those outside forces. A kid's not going to hang on to what they were crying about a couple minutes ago. Their mind is already moving on to whatever the next cartoon they're going to watch, or the next toy that they're going to play with, or the next the next interaction they could have, and or they're just trying to be silly because like my daughter, she still hasn't figured out the whole thing between silly and naughty, but she's moving on to that right away, and I mean, it can be a turn on a dime situation. Adults lose that. Adults lose that, and I think it's so important that we try to get back to that.
Mm-hmm.
in that we have so many things in our life every single day that we can't control. But if we can use humor as our reaction to those things, now obviously everybody knows there's going to be times when you absolutely have to be serious. You cannot break into certain situations with humor because it's wildly inappropriate, and it's certainly not going to make the situation better. But we have to use that humor and those functions of humor to make things better. I want to talk a little bit more about the functions and you mentioned the 4 functions of humor. I want to talk a little bit more about that, but for those people who are sitting there, listening right now and just saying, well, you know what? I'm really not that funny.
Yeah.
I don't have the quick wit that it takes to be funny. I hear these guys talking about improv. I hear them talking about humor. I'm not a funny person.
Yeah.
I know that there's things that you do and show people about how to maybe speed up that wit, speed up that ability to improv in situations that may be uncomfortable, to make those situations more.
That's a good point. The short answer about speeding up is related to improv, and it's not that people think fast as much as they don't judge a lot of things. So people say things who are witty will say things off the top of their heads, and you don't remember the times they bomb or they say something and nobody. So what I would encourage most people to do, and this is part of my work, is to recognize humor as a practice. In other words, no comedian, no funny person. Yes, some people have a quicker wit, but not all humor is wit. Humor is really about a way of looking at the world and seeing a different perspective, like we just talked about.
The kids.
That's why sometimes people say, look, what would your 6-year-old child do? Or as my mom used to say, maybe your mom used to say, when things were cranky and bad, say something like, this may seem bad now, but we'll be able to laugh about it later on.
Yep, I've heard that. I think everybody's heard that.
Everybody's heard that. And what that means is that perspective brings laughter. A different point of view gives you a different emotion. And because, just like we talked about, humor is all about a different point, entertaining at least 2 points of view at the same time. And this relates to the work with people who have different opinions. If you could find ways to ask yourself, what would make this true for them or for that person? And I think back to the to the early pandemic, and I remember there was a toilet paper shortage, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I don't think anybody can forget that. Yeah.
Right. So I saw this picture of a person in a casino. He was playing blackjack, but instead of having piles of chips, he had piles of toilet paper rolls.
Right.
Because what that visual showed you is it's become as important as money now because there's a shortage of it. So that's humor that you don't have to be funny about. You just have to recognize. First of all, I would say to the folks you're encouraging to develop their sense of humor, you don't have to be the maker of humor all the time. You just have to be the disseminator or the sender. So if you find something funny, if you see a cartoon, if you hear something, send it along or use it. Say, hey, I was watching the late shows last night, and this guy or this gal said this about something, and I thought it was funny. I just want to share. That makes you funny because you are giving the gift of laughter. You don't have to be the creator. You just have to be the giver.
No, I think that's an important point, because so much of what people see online nowadays, and I remember back to the first days of social media. The first days of social media before everybody started using it as this disseminator of toxicity and ugliness. There was so much funny out there, right? That people used it to share jokes, and people used it to share the funny little things that their kids were doing and the family was doing and stuff like that. Some people still do that, and I don't want to discount that. But this goes right to another point that I talk about quite often, is that reticular activating system. And if you look for things that are funny and you disseminate things that are funny, you are naturally going to keep finding and seeking out more stuff that is funny.
It's the law of attraction.
You're going to find stuff that's more funny, or more stuff that's funny rather, and then you can share more, and it's going to snowball. Yeah. I think that's a good point, because like I said, a lot of people they're like, I'm not a funny person. I can't tell jokes. I can't do anything. I'm the worst person at telling jokes, or I can never remember jokes. You don't have to remember jokes. Just point them out when you see them.
Point them out when you see them, and you don't have to be the creator. You can just be the disseminator. And what you're pointing out very much is that goes back to my belief that being using humor is a practice. It's a habit. And just what you said is so true, that the more you pay attention to what makes you laugh naturally, the more you share what you find funny, your reputation grows as a funny person. Think about the people in your life who you consider to be humorous or funny. The phrase I use is, we want to be around people who bring us joy.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So
Yeah.
if I know now, there's a side to it. I'm a humorist, and there will I'll go to a group or a party, and people say, make me laugh, because that's you have that high status, and well, I'm not
Sure.
working now. You're a doctor, cure me.
Right.
But your point is exactly right. It's not your responsibility to create it. It's sort of it's like wisdom or quotes. Not every quote that makes sense to you is one you come up with yourself. You see it, you get sent to it on social media, and you pass it on. So I think that's exactly how it works.
No, I think that's important. And, it's also important not to discount the fact that how important humor is to the overall mental health and well-being of each of us as an individual, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about, surround yourself by funny people. We want to surround ourselves by people who bring us joy. On the converse, people who surround themselves by people who make them miserable are they themselves going to be miserable. You cannot be a happy person surrounded by people who are miserable.
Yeah.
You can, if you want to be happy, they talk about, you're the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. If you want to be funny, spend time around funny people.
Yeah.
If you want to be mentally well, spend time around people who are mentally well.
Yeah.
And that, talk about how important humor is to overall mental health and well-being.
Yeah. That's a great question. It boils down to balance. Life is a balance of different emotions and timing. Your example about being around people who are giving you joy or who are negative refers to the fact that we're talking about energy. And when you're around energy givers, enthusiastic people, supportive people, you pick that up. When you're around depressed people, angry people, energy drainers, it sucks the life force right out of you.
Yeah.
And you're exactly right that we have choices about who we want to spend our time with, and also the people we spend our time with, consciously or unconsciously, affect our character. And I think the most extreme, or an extreme example of this, is this knowledge that people who grow up in abused households become abusers. That's what they learn.
Yeah.
People who grow up in loving households become more loving. People who grow up in curiosity, risk-taking households are able to do that. So your point is right on. We may not be funny or joke tellers, but we have the option about who we spend our time with most of the time.
Yeah. No, that's right.
And then to go back to your earlier question about the 4 functions of humor is a double-edged sword. It serves both a purpose of connection. So one of the functions of the social function of humor is as a connector. When we laugh with someone who shares if we get the joke, the phrase, I get it, I'm with you, I understand, we're shaking our heads, we're going, yeah, that's an affirmation that we are in that moment together, which makes us feel less alone.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Get that bond.
And that's why I think when it's much more interesting to laugh with other people than by ourselves.
No doubt.
If you think about it, when you're in a movie and people are laughing, the laughter fills the space and people are sort of connected. When you're by yourself, it's like, it's funny, but okay. But when you're with other people, a party or something, it builds.
It does. Yep. That laughter builds on itself. Yeah. I guess I never thought of it that way, Izzy, but yeah, when you're in a room full of people laughing, you're going to laugh longer. Those endorphins are going to flow longer that come along with that laughter. But yeah, if you're just by yourself, maybe a quick giggle. But
and
you
the
don't have that
negatives,
connectedness.
the connect, and the negative side of that is if you're in a room where everybody's laughing but you're not, or you aren't in on the joke, you're on the outside.
Yeah.
You
Yep.
walk into this is where, let's say you're at work and your team is talking about real stuff and laughing, and the boss, you see the boss at the door, the laughter stops.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a knowledge that what we're laughing at is just for us. We see our point of view. We don't want that person to see the point of view.
Okay.
So the connectedness aspect is one of the most positive reasons we use humor. A second function is we use humor as a shield to protect ourselves. It's called self-derogatory humor. Mm-hmm. We put ourselves down in order to prevent other people from telling us painful truths. Right. So we'll walk in, let's say, you're not comfortable with your weight. You may walk in and go, oh man, I thought I was the, Shrek when I looked in the mirror today. That's to prevent people from telling me what I know already. I gained too much weight.
Sure.
So there's I call that the shield. You laugh at yourself before other people could laugh at you, as a way of bringing the truth out. So that's two. The third one that is the weapon. Humor is a weapon. And when we talk about sarcasm, we talk about put down humor, all the isms, the racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, all of those things are about putting people down. Again, think of the language we use. When you're sarcastic, it's win-lose. I stuck it to him. I left him speechless. I had the last word. All of those things are meant to diminish other people, and by the result of that, you elevate yourself. So when people are afraid, and this goes to stress management, a lot of times when people are stressed, they'll find a target, and humor is almost always about a target. Who's the target of your humor? And that tells you what the function is. If you put someone else down, even if you're just kidding, so to speak, you're still telling a truth.
Right.
So this weapon aspect is something to pay attention to, because it could be very destructive to relationships. And then the fourth aspect. So we have the connection, we have the shield, we have the weapon, and we have the spotlight. People use humor to bring attention to themselves, because people are, who are funny get attention. But sometimes people use it to distract away from something. So if there's an uncomfortable topic going on, somebody may make a silly joke to break the ice. I know I'm a cancer survivor, and I do programs for survivors on the importance of humor for caregivers. And for a long time, cancer was a topic that, if you start talking about it, people would make silly jokes about it because they want to break the tension again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So those are the four functions: the shield, the weapon, the bridge, the connector, and the spotlight.
Yeah. Yeah. I think all of those are incredibly important points, and each one of those has their place, and each one of those has their appropriate time. And one thing that you talk about the weapon, and so there's times when people use that humor inappropriately, and I think that's where they got to draw that fine line. Is we can take a dig at somebody that's going to get it or understand it or whatever, and use that humor there, but then sometimes people take it too far, and things get ugly. So I think that's one of the things that we have to be conscious of, but we also have to be conscious of the fact that far too many people nowadays, Izzy, are getting stuck in this situation where everything offends them, right? So you've got those people that are like, okay, well, everything's offensive, and now we can't even use humor. But I think those people are far more miserable than the general public. So people that are offended, they generally want to be offended, so they're looking for ways to be offended. What would you say, just with regard to that? And this is just, I want your personal opinion. How do you deal with people who can't take a joke? How do you deal with those that just, like I said, they are looking, I call it the perpetual victim mentality. They're seeking out points of affirmation to continue to be a victim. Mm-hmm. But those people are out there, and people like you, Izzy, are people that that know how to break that down and use humor to break that down. So what's your advice on that?
The hard part of that is it's hard to tell someone else how to behave and how to react, because I've been taught that all emotions are valid. So if somebody feels victimized, my curiosity is, let's talk about that. And remember, all humor has a target. So it may be that the target is what the person identifies with the target. But our society, our world is in a transitional time. And I think that one of the things that's happening is that people are experiencing new ways of reacting because of social media and the internet. We're so flooded with different opinions that we connect to some and don't connect to others. And I would say that for me, one of the things about humor in the context that you describe is it helps me understand the other person. And I also say, well, maybe that joke is offensive to this person. I wonder, I could see that, or I can't see that. And it starts me thinking, and again, it goes back to that work you do about bringing people together. Getting to know what's behind people's behavior is a way to get to know what their heart's the drivers are, their emotions. And listening to people's humor or their inability to absorb humor tells me something about them, that they're angry, that they don't want to hear a different opinion. Mm-hmm. They're stuck in their own, in conflict management. There's this differentiation between our positions about a subject and our goals. Mm-hmm. Now, our goal could be the same, but our positions could be completely different. So let's say in education, our goal could be to have literate children, but your position is we can't use this book, or my position is we have to use this book. So we have the same goal, but we have completely different positions. Mm-hmm. That's where. So listening to your humor or your reactions forces me to say, "Tell me more about that." What we found that funny. You didn't. Where's the gap? So it's almost like a microscope on interpersonal relationships.
Yeah, and it helps to build that curiosity, right? I mean, I know in our pre-show conversation we talked about the work that I do with Braver Angels, mm-hmm. and how important it is, especially in the world that we live today, how important it is to find ways to bridge that divide and cross that gap. Find out where that disconnect is. So often in politics, Izzy, not to make this a political conversation, but so often in politics, I look at the things that maybe the right and the left are talking about, and I look at it and I hear what they're saying, and they're like, okay, we do have that same end goal, I think, but yeah, that beginning position is totally different. And instead of looking for ways to bridge that divide, they just start to attack each other and attack each other's position, and then while that end goal is the same, they never get to anywhere, because they're too busy attacking the other person with ad hominem attacks, or just attacking their initial position, or attacking the way that I want to, or you want to get to that end goal. If more people used humor and actually tried to figure out more about the other side's position, I think it'd be a much better world.
I think so too. I think as you were talking, something came up I hadn't really thought of. But if there are these polar opposites, or people who are in a conflict, if we can say, hey, look, okay, let's leave this for a side. Who do you find funny? What do you laugh at? Tell me your favorite comedian, or do you watch what's on Netflix? When was the last time you laughed? What do you do with your family? That if I think there's a possibility that if we step outside of our differences and take a topic like humor, or maybe it's food, or maybe it's hobbies, where we build. I think what's missing in these conflictual discussions is common ground. We're focused on we're on both sides of the river. We're not realizing that the river connects us both. So, right. Yep. It's like, you like fishing. I like fishing, I have this activity I use when I have groups one of the early activities is in a group of 3, 4, or 5, and you're welcome to use this with your teams. Come up with 3 things this group has in common, and 1 thing that's unique for each person in the group. You don't have to be the only person in the world, but only. So let's say the 3 things that this group has in common is we all have visited California. We all watch Netflix, and we have kids. And 1 thing unique for us, that person's the only one wearing glasses. That person's the only one who's been to Europe. That person's the only one who's an only child. You get the idea.
Yeah.
Then the question is, notice that everybody we meet has something in common with us, and everyone we meet has unique experiences that we don't share.
Yeah.
So that starts the question. Oh, I didn't know you have a bike. Yeah, I got a bike. That kind of stuff. So that's where I think humor would help. If very often it's divisive, but very often if we can find things we laugh at together, the connection piece, then at least we have a conversation. It's a little Lego block in this big relationship we want to build. So I think that would help.
Yeah, no, I think finding those ways, going back to the 4 functions, that connectedness, that bridging function of humor, I think if people, that's another thing that got so ugly over the past couple of years with this pandemic and stuff like that. People maybe on one side or the other of the pandemic discussion, or the government's response to the pandemic discussion, and then you combine that with the ugliness that became politics over the past few years, and people started to lose sight of that connectedness piece. Why did we enjoy spending time together in the first place? What was it that made us want to be together? What was it that made us want to spend time together?
Exactly.
A lot of times it was that laughter. It was that humor. It was those, playing games together, just playing together in general, whatever you want to talk about. And they started to focus too much on those things that separated us.
Exactly.
The fact that, we disagree on politics, or we disagree on this particular politician, or we disagree on the government's response to the pandemic. They started focusing on those few things that they didn't agree on. They lost sight of that connectedness piece that maybe it was humor. Maybe it was a neighbor that we spent time in the driveway drinking cold beers with, and we always used to laugh and talk about just silly stuff that made had no relative bearing on most things in life, but it made us laugh, and that was where we connected.
Yeah.
A lot of those things got lost in the past few years.
Yes, they did, because we were isolated, and we had and things were very scary. Remember, when people are frightened, it's not easy to have a sense of humor, because you're in this fight or flight or freeze. There's a third aspect to it. I used to think it was only fight or flight, but now I learned it's also freeze. Mm-hmm. So you either run, you fight, or you do nothing. And people didn't know what to do. You want to think about humor. I would suggest people listening, think back to your pandemic experiences and the things you did at the beginning. I remember going to the supermarket and then leaving the bags out front on my porch, and then taking each box out of the bag and wiping it down before I put it into the pantry.
Right? How crazy was that? Yeah.
Yeah, right. So in hindsight, that's pretty funny.
It is. And I'm hoping those are the things, Izzy, that people start to laugh at now when they look back. But you're right. A lot of those came out of pure fear. Yeah. And people were genuinely, terrified because of what we were being fed and stuff on that, and for some people, I'm not going to discount, and please don't anybody get on me about the realistic terror that this was for a certain demographic of people, because it was very real and is still for some people. But some of the things that we did, because of the information that we had at the time, we have to look back at it now. You have to use that humor to look back at it and say, man, was that wild. What the fact that we even did these certain things, and be able to look back. We talked about our mothers when we were young, saying, someday we'll be able to look back at this and laugh. I hope that we get to that point, and a lot of people are still off very angry and very bitter about a lot of the things that happened, and as right they should be. But we have to laugh. I mean, I don't care. Some of the worst things I have happened in my life, I look back and I look at back whether how I reacted or whether I look back at how somebody else reacted, and I do laugh. I laugh. Some of it's cringeworthy laughter, but I laugh, and I'm like, you just have to look back and laugh.
Yeah, release that tension, and to go back to what was happening was we're a once in a lifetime experience. We were scared to do anything. We couldn't talk to other people, and usually when you're frightened, you want to get with other people and stay warm and cozy, and couldn't do that. And it turns out that the people in charge, all politicians, all governments, didn't know what to do. So they tried stuff that didn't work or did work because nobody had experience here.
Right.
So, and we're on, we're ordinary folks. We're on the bottom of this power change. And on some level, we need the people who have control over our lives to know what the heck they're doing. And what we realized is nobody knew what to do.
Right.
And that made us even scared. Nobody knew what to do. We couldn't meet with other people. And everything that we touched or tried to touch might kill us.
Right. It's kind of like being on an airplane and all of a sudden you realize that the pilot's gone. And everybody's
the pilot's gone. Anybody know how to fly this plane? No. Well,
now what do we do?
But maybe the looking back on the humor is to recognize that as human beings, we are silly sometimes. We do get emotional, and it still goes to the fact, as you mentioned several times, the key of humor and the improv piece is about being able to stay present. That's the secret to improv. Is the past is gone, the future's unknown. Now is the only time to act, and I can't judge. I got to take a risk. Maybe I'll be wrong. But the humor is a way of connecting, and I think that's what I'll take away from this conversation is the reminder that connection is the source of success in this part of life.
Yeah, no, and something you just said there just kind of hit home for me is when I think about humor, not every joke is funny, but if you don't get up to the plate and take a swing at it, you're never going to get there. And people have to take that risk sometimes. They have to. That risk is everything in life has some risk associated with it, but in certain events, especially humor, has such a great reward that comes along with it, being that connectedness, the release of tension that comes along with humor, the things. So, get up there, take that risk, say that.
And that's the other thing.
Take that risk.
And there is appropriateness. You're not going to tell the same jokes to your kids as you tell to your relationships to the people at work. And not everybody will find everything funny. And that's okay, because the ones who do find it funny, those are the ones you connect with. Remember, the body. Yeah, I get it. I'm with you. I understand. That's funny. I see your point. All of those things are connectors of human experience. And since we're basically alone in this universe, and we're born alone, we die alone, and in between, we want to make these relationships. This is one strand that I think helps, and that's why it's so important. But it's so misunderstood. So I really appreciate us having this conversation.
Oh man, it's been incredible, Izzy, and I thank you for joining me. So much for people to unpack here, but the real lesson that take away here is humor is so important in our relationships. One thing, Izzy, you just said that we only get so much time in this life. We're born alone, we die alone. It's what we do in between. It's what we do in between those bookends that really makes the difference. And having those interpersonal relationships, focusing on what connects us more than what divides us, and just trying to enjoy each day. Make each day the day that you want it to be. And the way that you can do that is through humor, through improv. You don't have to be the funny guy. You just have to recognize what's funny and use it to connect you to
exactly. When I first started doing keynote speeches, my humor program was called Managing the Dash. What I meant was on when you look at a tombstone, there's the year you're born and the year you died, and then there's a dash in between.
That's right.
So managing the dash is really how you run your life. Yeah, it's a recipe. Humor is one of the ingredients, and a lot of people say I can't be serious if I use a sense of humor, and they're mixing up the idea of seriousness and solemnity. Humor is very serious. There's a lot of, if you remember the TV show MASH, if you remember, there's a lot of humor, that political cartoons about serious subjects. Those are all serious, but they're humorous. When you're solemn, people don't approach you, and those are the people who never smile, never laugh, don't want to show their playfulness, and I think they lose out, and I think we all lose out.
You've got the tools. People can check you out at izzyg.com. Obviously, there's going to be ways to connect with you, Izzy, in the show notes from this episode. My friend, I look forward to things with you in the future, and
That'd be
thank
fun.
you so much again. Thank you for joining me.
It was my pleasure. It was great. Thanks, Will.
Friends, if there's anything in this episode that provided exceptional value to you, please make sure to hit that share button. Share it with your friends, share it far and wide. And of course, if you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe right from our website so you can get the D-Rate the Hate podcast sent to your email inbox every week. So this is Wilk wrapping up for the week, saying get out there, be kind to one another, be grateful for everything that you've got, and remember, it's up to you to make each and every day the day that you want it to be. If there is something that you would like to share with me, you can catch me on most social media platforms, or you can email me directly, wilk@wilksworld.com. With that, my friends, I am going to back on out of here, and we will catch you next week. Take care.